provide you with some useful or interesting insights. So I am a senior fellow with the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program, which is a think tank in DC. Our vision is that every community will be prosperous, just, and resilient, no matter its starting point. And we, in furtherance of that vision, we collaborate with local leaders to help develop solutions that then can be shared and scaled across the country. And as you can imagine, focusing on the labor market and young adults and the connection between school and work is a big part of that vision. I focus on the labor market and how trends vary by race and education and age and geography. And then I look at strategies to help prevent disconnection from school and work and to provide on-ramps to good jobs. And today I'm here to talk to you about youth and young adults, and specifically work-based learning. And first I want to acknowledge what an unusual time it is to be working at the confluence of education and the labor market, two institutions that have just been massively challenged in the past year. And we're having a massively overdue reckoning about the role of racism in our society. So at the very least, these are interesting times. And it's been brutal for young adults. History tells us that they're always the hardest hit by recessions. They have the least experience, the smallest networks, and less seniority compared to older workers, so they're more vulnerable. And in this case, they're also vulnerable, especially vulnerable to pandemics, specifically to the physical distancing measures that have undercut the foundations of so much of education and out of school time programming. And many students have simply disengaged. The obstacles to remote learning and to participation in any kind of organized activity is daunting. And I'd love to hear more from you all about how you have been handling this. So first I want to start off with a couple of stats that have stuck with me. This is from a report by ETS, the folks who bring you the GRE and other educational assessment tools. They looked at disconnection from school and work. And what they found was that it increases with age. It just doesn't go away. It doesn't get better on its own. At age 18, only 1% of young adults are disconnected. And that's because the vast majority are in school. High school is the last universally provided mandatory institution where if you are not there and you're 18 and you're in a school's boundary, chances are it's someone's job to find you and enroll you and educate you. It doesn't always happen. There's flaws, people drop out, graduation rates aren't 100%, but that's what the rules say. Fast forward to age 20, now 5% are disconnected from school and work. They have not found their way into and through post-secondary. Maybe they've had a low-wage job and cycled in and out. The great conveyor belt of K through 12 has ended, and now what? We have a default answer of go to college. I'll never bet against education, but we don't make sure that people are actually prepared to enroll in and succeed and to complete. We have a lot more work to do on that front. Now, look at age 26, 12% of young adults are disconnected. That is a big, big number. We are losing people after high school. We need stronger guardrails and we need stronger safety nets to help keep young people on track as they transition from school to work and from adolescence to adulthood. And we don't need to start from scratch. I mean, we have a very weak policy framework, but we have so much knowledge from practice and programs about how to make this work. We need to suspend assumptions about the status quo, how money should flow, where learning takes place, how we demonstrate learning. but we know a lot. And the thing that I want to focus on is work-based learning. In some previous research that I did with a group called Child Trends, we looked at adults at age 30 who had experienced some sort of economic or social disadvantage in their adolescence. And then we tracked their employment and education over time from age 16 to 30. And what we found was that those who had participated in some sort of work-based learning program in high school, like an apprenticeship, an internship, a co-op, they were more likely to have a good job at age 30 than those who had not. It was not a huge effect, but the fact that there was any effect at all after 10 years is notable. So I want to highlight what work-based learning can do. It's a chance for students to learn about the technical and academic and interpersonal skills that they'll need to function in a workplace where they're going to spend decades of their lives. They're going to enter it in just a few years, and to learn things in a way that's very difficult to achieve in the classroom. And one of the things we wondered was whether it was the relationship with the adult that was at least partially driving these positive effects. Because when done well, work-based learning is going to have a supportive relationship with an adult either as a supervisor or as a mentor or someone providing guidance. So we wanted to look into this issue of relationships more and how it relates to work-based learning. And we looked into the research literature of a few different fields of education and youth development and workforce development. We talked to a bunch of people in the field, and we identified 3 core concepts of a high-quality work-based learning program. First, positive relationships with adults that support growth and development. Second, social capital that provides information and context regarding employment and also educational opportunities and other enrichment kinds of things. And third, the bread and butter of work-based learning is work experiences that offer authentic work experiences that offer the opportunities for hands-on learning and expose young people to new environments and expectations. So I should say that sometimes these are in third-party employers' offices, but sometimes these work-based learning programs, they can be offered within the program itself, if it's a culinary training program, if it's a soccer program where young people are acting as refs or coordinators, you know, for the younger kid, like if they're helping to organize a soccer league. There are so many ways that work-based learning can be a positive effect in someone's life. And I would say that in the youth development field, it is very clear how important relationships are with adults. And within workforce development, it's very clear how important social networks and social capital is. But neither of those things are really incentivized in program rules or in program measures of success. So it is, sometimes people, when we talked to practitioners, they felt like they were having to sort of to think really creatively about how to use all of their resources to, you know, to make sure that their program counselors or their youth workers it's like they had to work around the different rules of the funding streams and the grants that they had to make sure that they had workers who were appropriately trained with clear job descriptions, with clear program rules about how, you know, supportive relationships are key to this. And that is something that I'd love to talk more about how we could change the incentives and the performance measures on this. About social capital, by its nature, work-based learning has the potential to increase young people's networks because you're putting them in new situations. I remember talking with one young man who was in a culinary training program where they periodically they had local chefs come in and teach classes. And he talked to this chef about post-college, training programs after high school, like the Culinary Institute of America. And this restaurant owner, this chef, gave him his card and was like, let me know if you want to talk further about that. That's a classic example of the kind of weak tie and a social contact that can help you get ahead. And that can provide an inroad into the informal referral process that's so common in recruitment and hiring. And broadening that informal recruitment channel is really important to opening up opportunities, especially for young people of color and from backgrounds that otherwise aren't represented in that particular field. And now that I have described as what I see as the elements of high quality work-based learning, I'd love to hear more from our fellow panelist about how she puts this into action, if she disagrees with me, if there's any other comments that she has. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Martha. Hi, everybody. My name is Christy Willett. I work for the University of Maine Cooperative Extension and am the PI of our Maine 4-H Community Central program, which is kind of a second iteration of a program that we were funded before. This time around, our focus really is exactly what Martha was talking about, around kind of social capital and educational capital, but specifically with teens. So I'm going to just take a step back and talk a little bit about what our program looks like first, so you can kind of picture it in your mind. And then I can talk a little bit about how we're measuring social and educational capital, because I think, as Martha talked about, it's something that we're all doing, but we don't necessarily take the time to highlight and spotlight the amazing connections and I like to think of myself and our staff here at Maine 4-H and all of us that work with youth, we're really conduits. So as we think about social capital and we think about connections, it aligns really nicely with Brofenbrenner's ecological model, if you're familiar with that. So that's the entire basis of what Maine 4-H Community Central looks like. So we're in 2 cities. Laugh at me because it's Maine, and Maine is very small in terms of our population. So our city size is like 30,000 people. I know in some of the urban areas, that's just like a small town, but in Maine, that's a lot because we have less than 1 million people here in our state. So we're in the 2 largest cities in our state. We only have 3 cities, by the way. And we're partnered in our public housing in both Lewiston, Maine and Portland, Maine. So our entire program is centered where kids are at. So we have this expectation that all of the programs, all the things that we are doing, we're not expecting young people to come to us, we're going to them. So flash forward, we designed this, it was awesome, it was working great, so high touch, so neighborhood focused, and then COVID hit, and that's a whole nother workshop, and we're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to talk about what it looks like when the world is normal, whatever that means. So we're in communities, we have community education professionals that are based in public housing, they have offices there, and it's really kind of uncovering that power of connection that Martha was talking about. So getting to know the families, getting to know the teens, being somebody that they see on a daily basis, and providing them with real practical experiences, which are rooted within positive youth development, but also sneaking in those workforce development skills, okay? So the core of our program model is focused on community, and it's focused 100% on relationships. Without understanding and getting to know kids. And what I mean by that is like taking the time to realize who their favorite Korean pop band is, because that's a thing with teenage girls right now, or what kind of video game they're playing, or what kind of car they hope to have in the next 5 years. Like, it's really in the trenches, getting to know them, getting to know their families. And then based on their interests and what their desires and hopes and needs and skills are, we design intentional, cultivated experiences for them that, like I said, are rooted in that positive youth development framework with this educational and social capital kind of thing happening as we go along. So those workforce development skills for us in our program are scaffolded, and they're scaffolded and built in within kind of 4 different program areas. The way that we identified our program areas in Maine is that Maine is actually one of the oldest states in the nation. And we have, in the next 15 years or so, and for some professions, it's going to be as quick as the next 5 years, we're going to see this huge gap of, we have all of these jobs available, but we don't have people with the skills that are needed to be able to fill these positions. So we identified these 4 major content areas in Maine, and one of them is actually teaching. We're going to have a ton of teachers here in Maine retire, and not enough teachers kind of coming through the pipeline to be able to fill those positions. Healthcare is another one. Social justice is the third, and fourth is around the food systems. So we've designed internships around those 4 things, and those internships last for our kids between 8 to 12 weeks. And each one of the internships has a practical application of skills. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the one that we're gearing up for right now because it's in the front of my brain, and that's our teaching internship. And through that program, we have a program called Summer of Science. We have college teenagers. They're not part of our SciFar project, but they're supporting our SciFar project. So we have teenagers come back and they oversee teams of teen teachers. Our teams of teen teachers then go and teach STEM education. So this year we're all about engineering design. We have 4 lessons for 4 weeks in July. One of the activities is actually designing your own face mask, which I'm really excited about, using really cool materials. But anyway, so these teachers, these teen teachers, are learning skills such as communication. They're learning how to manage their schedule. They're learning how to public speak because they're going to have to speak in front of the group. They're learning how to manage a group. So they're learning a lot of those soft skills that you hear about that are not usually measurable. But also for a lot of these kids, it's the first time that they've been looked at as an expert in something. So they have not only this opportunity to kind of be looked at as a member in their community that is something that the little kids are achieving to be, they also are kind of experts. So it's that very intentional, cultivated experience. And for kids that have participated in the Summer of Science teaching program, a lot of times I'll hear like, I never ever thought I would want to work with kids or be a teacher, but this might be something I'm into. This might be something I want to do. So just giving them that safe place to try it out. If they don't like it, it's 12 weeks and they don't have to ever do it again. And that's kind of how we sell it to them of like, okay, this is a really cool program. I think you'd be great for it. Why don't you give it a try? If you like it, cool, you can come back next summer. If not, we'll find something else for you. We do pay them a very small stipend to participate in our project as teen teachers. But it's a great way for them to kind of experience those soft skills. Does anybody have questions? I'm talking a mile a minute. I'm sorry. It's kind of how I roll. Go ahead and put them in the chat box, or if you want to unmute your mic and ask questions, feel free.
What kind of training do you do to help the students, the teen teachers, do their thing?
Yeah, so we're actually starting next week. So it's a little different than how we usually do it because of COVID. So I am actually doing all of my training this year virtually because I had 2 kids that couldn't come to in-person trainings. They just weren't comfortable or they just couldn't get there. So we're going to do 6 sessions of 90 minutes each. So each session has kind of a very specific skill associated with it. So like the first session obviously is going to be like filling out their paperwork, knowing where their sites are going to be, what time they need to be there. So that's another piece of this is the time management piece of it. And then we talk about the experiential learning model. We talk about ages and stages. So what does it mean when I'm putting you with a group of 3rd and 4th graders? So those are going to be 9 and 10-year-olds. What should you expect from them? How can you make it so they're going to want to learn from you? And then of course we spend a lot of time on the content. So my interns model the first lesson with a lesson plan for them. And then as small groups, they go out and each one of them takes on one of the other lessons and they have to teach it to the rest of the group. So it's a lot of that scaffolding modeling back and forth, back and forth. And that's kind of what our training looks like. And it's very much rooted. My colleague, Mitch Mason, who is the other PI on this project, actually crosswalked our teen teaching training with the PRKC for our volunteers. So we're trying to kind of scaffold them into the next generation of 4-H volunteers as well with those skill sets. I see some questions. How much is the stipend and how much time do students put in to earn it? So for the summer stipend is a little more than our other three internships. It's $80. So it's not a lot of money. And they're putting in about 16 hours of training, and then it's about an hour and a half every week for the sites that they're teaching at. We are lucky. We are partnered with our university, and our university is an EPSCoR recipient. So EPSCoR actually pays a portion of our stipends. So SciFar pays like a portion, which is the 80, and then we're able to pay an additional above and beyond through EPSCoR. So for the entire summer, they actually get $125, but we can leverage those funds, which has been great. It's been a great partnership. In terms of industry, our healthcare, our social justice, and our food systems internships are very much connected to industry and local government. So the big piece with social capital is around the connections. And a lot of the literature shows that young people who are at risk, people of color, first generation, 4-Hers, first generation college students, even if they have those connections, they don't know how to utilize those connections. So we spend a lot of time kind of modeling what it looks like. So, hey, you met your Senator Libby from Lewiston came and did an awesome presentation around social justice for our teens this fall virtually. Now that you know Senator Libby, let's practice writing him an email or reaching out to him or making a connection about something else that you're seeing in your community. So really trying to help not only make those intentional connections, but model and teach our young people how to utilize those connections, because those connections might not be something that they're going to need their junior year of high school, but maybe their senior year when they're applying for a scholarship or something comes up in their community. Just really trying to help them realize the power of those connections. And a lot of the families that we work with are immigrant families, new Mainers, coming from other places in the world. And the idea of social capital and connections is a very Western idea. And a lot of families are kind of hesitant when we talk about like these networks. So trying to help them to understand the value and to see how it actually pays back for their own kids' education is important. Curriculum, we design our own. So we are working on a book, like a training guide that we've used here in Maine that we'll share with other people. Oh, Mitch, you're here. Jump in, please. I didn't realize you were here. Jump in. So yeah, and Mitch, do you want to unmute and talk a little bit about your partnership with your local school department? Because that's really, really cool.
Sure. So there's a huge demand. I'm in Portland, Maine, and based on what our Chamber of Commerce and our local school district was really pushing local organizations to provide internships, and they jumped on our internships, our teen teaching internships, and asked if it could be included. But their stipends are $500 and they are paying for them. And what we're finding is that other organizations provide much higher stipends, at least in our city, in order for high school students to be able to participate. In order for them to choose this learning experience over a job at JCPenney's or fast food, they need the stipend in order to participate. So we are finding that stipends are a valuable way to drive interest. We have a long waiting list for our internship this summer, in part because of COVID ending and in part because of the higher stipends. I was also going to add, we do use 4-H 101 as part of our training.
Thank you. Yeah, and that money that Mitch mentioned is actually part of the CARES Act. That's how the money came into the Portland School Department. So it's an interesting way of applying those funds. I have not seen that happening in other school districts around our state, but Portland's really innovative, and it's awesome that our teams are going to be able to take the benefit of that. But worth exploring in your own communities too, because there's lots of money that are coming into local school departments, millions of dollars at this point around care. So, and there's no policy to drive it.
Another thing we've learned, we've been doing teen teaching for a while. We included in SciFar to make it focus it more on a workforce development opportunity and less on just teaching science to younger kids. But we work with some colleagues in Indiana, California, and some other states that are also doing teen teaching. And there's a Joe article that's under review that describes some of the different forms of teen teaching, but an AEBC group, an Access, Equity, Belonging Champion group, is also looking at teen teaching as an avenue for being inclusive towards immigrant and refugee youth and other vulnerable populations. It does seem to resonate with certain groups because it's very neighborhood-based. Teaching is a universal concept, and many cultures that wherever they are, they value family orientation and helping out in the neighborhood. So it's opening up a lot of doors.
So questions for us?
Martha, did you want to highlight the blog post that you posted? You're muted.
Thanks. You know, I'm never muted when I should be, and I'm muted when I shouldn't be. In the chat, I posted a link to a blog post called 6 Takeaways on How Young Adults Find Good Jobs that highlights some of the major findings of that research that I talked about. And what I can also do is in the chat put a link to the more recent paper and an associated blog post that we just did on work-based learning and how it can be a force for equity and economic opportunity. One of the things I worry though is like, I just wish we had a better label than work-based learning, because I think it doesn't resonate with a lot of people. They don't know what it means. And even though, you know, a lot of people are familiar with the idea of internships, there's just a lot of developmental experiences that actually can fall under the label of work-based learning that wouldn't necessarily be thought of that way. Like this teen teaching that Christy just described is work-based learning, but I don't know that you would lead with describing it that way.
Yeah, definitely not. And I think, I'm not sure, I guess there's this tension about when I think about 4-H, because I think 4-H has this gift of a long-term connection. Like, we're built in communities, we're able, if families engage with us, we can stay with them from the time their child is 5 until their child is 18. No, like, it's such a gift. And like, we always try to uncover, like, what's the secret sauce around 4-H? Like, what makes it so unique and so special? And I think that's part of it, that long-term longevity relationship that even for kids that come into our program at 12, like, they can stay through 18. And that's such a formative years developmentally for them. So like, that tension between like 4-H and workforce prep is not something that you hear very often, but I think it's something that we're all doing. And I don't know if it's a verbiage or a language piece, or if we just haven't spent enough time thinking about it. But it's a very interesting kind of thing to think about, of like, I feel like even my little Clover Buds in my county program, because I support a 4-H program across my county, not just SciFar, I see them practicing those lifelong workforce development skills at the age of 5 as much as I do when they're 18, but we don't call it that. So it's a very interesting kind of tension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a question came in about evaluation tools that I'm also curious about hearing about, and how you measure also soft skills.
Yeah. And Mitch, jump in, please. I feel like evaluation is something that we all struggle with. It's really hard to measure things that take a long time, right? So like these skills are not something that you're going to introduce to a young person and then the next day they've mastered it. So for us, it's a lot of anecdotal stuff. So like we ask our teen teachers to complete a reflective project record as part of their expectation of their internship. So they set goals at the beginning. So we're able to kind of measure between the goals that they set and the goals they achieved for short term. But we hear a lot of the stories in years to come of like, oh, you know what? I actually went to college to become a teacher because of my teen teacher experience. Or we have a few interns that are interning with us this summer that were teen teachers in previous summers. And we have interns that come back year after year. And when I say interns, I'm talking about the college students, not the high school students. We do utilize our common measures, our pre and post tests through CIFAR. It's hard because they're long and they take a long time, but making sure that we kind of build that in. But interviews, we've done exit interviews. We actually have an article that hopefully gets published about teen teaching, as Mitch talked about, that talks a little bit more about the intentional focus groups, the intentional feedback that we used with our program. But yeah, I feel like the outcome piece is something that we could probably do a better job of, but it's hard to do when you're in the moment of the program, right? So just kind of thinking about those pieces. I just finished up my dissertation looking at social capital, and I used something called eco mapping, which was kind of this interview process with kids. It's usually used in social work, but interview process with kids to like have them identify their supports, their struggles, and their successes. And that was a really interesting way to measure how they perceive their connections, both like social capital and educational capital as well.
Do you evaluate what the younger kids learn as well?
Yeah, I mean, we have. So when the younger kids were our primary audience, which they were in our previous iteration of the CIFAR project, we were using pre and post tests with the younger kids and we're able to see a increase in skills, or particularly around STEM skills in the delivery from the teens. But yeah, it's tough. I see Mark said that youth development work is a trajectory for sure.
Evaluation, it goes up and down from year to year, especially with this project. There's been some years where we've had the time early on and some resources, some colleagues at the university who have helped us conduct the research. So I will post an article from the Journal of STEM Outreach that we had published a few years ago. But it's a challenge because we place the teens along with the college interns as supervisors in local communities where young people already exist, where boys and girls clubs, libraries, etc. And so those aren't 4-H kids per se. They're not enrolled 4-H kids. That doesn't mean we don't or can't evaluate them, but it is harder because we don't always control the environment and the time and the situation those kids are in. We were fortunate enough to do a post survey with around 300 YMCA campers a few years ago. And again, I'll put that link in the chat.
Are there any other questions for Mitch, Martha, or Christy? Okay, we have a few more minutes. Mark, do you want to go ahead and introduce the book?
I do. I think I am. Yep, I am muted. So you all should know that this is one of the sessions that will receive a copy of a book. The book that folks who attended this session will receive is Making It: What Today's Kids Need for Tomorrow's World And on Monday, you'll receive a form at the email that you used to register for the event. In that form, we'll ask you if you prefer a physical or a digital copy, and then request the mailing address if you choose a physical copy. Obviously, if it's a digital copy, we're just going to email you the link and you can download it to your device of choice. Be sure that you complete that form by Friday, the following Friday, June 18th, because there will be a hard cutoff so that we can process this and move it on out. And I feel just a little bit like the announcer on The Price is Right, so I'm going to back up that.
I guess it's almost as good as the snacks, Mark. It's almost as good as the snacks.
I try, I really do.
Okay, we have a few more minutes, well, about 5 minutes before our next, before our break and our next session ends. So I would like to pose just a question to Christy, Martha, and Mitch, and either of you can answer it. And the work that you've done with young people, you know, and Martha, you talked about the research that you've done at Brookings, and then of course, Christy and Mitch working in extension. How do you integrate research and practice to create the outcome that you have?
I don't know if this answers the question, Jennifer, but I know the times we've been able to do a full evaluation, either of the high school students, the younger kids, or the interns, we've taken that information and modified our program going forward. And one example is when we did do a post survey of the 300 kids a few years ago, I believe this came from Common Measures, we found that kids did not understand what engineering meant, the term. The same kids were very likely to say, I want to be a scientist, or I want to study science in high school. And even though the activities were engineer focused, they would say they were not interested in engineering and didn't want to study in high school. So what we took away from that, based on our literature review, is that kids struggle with what engineering is. So the next year we used the term engineer a lot, and we included the engineer design process as part of the curriculum. And we've been doing that a lot lately with our STEM kits everywhere we teach. So that's an example, maybe.
Yeah, I can also piggyback on that too. So I had the gift of a sabbatical the first 3 months of this year to finish my dissertation, which was the first time ever in my academic career that I was only focused on one thing. So like that gift, you know what I mean? Like we are always doing 1,000 things, and the research piece of it is always like, okay, we've got to do the research piece too. So that gift of writing a dissertation, which I don't know if I highly recommend or don't recommend. I'm still in the trauma phase of that whole thing, but just being able to kind of focus on that one thing, and the outcomes of my focus group in my case study that I did has really helped me now to determine how I'm going to guide my practice. So how am I going to guide the decisions and the things that I agree to for the youth in my county? For me right now, and it could change over time, but it has to be highly focused on, is it going to build a long-standing relationship for them? Is it going to make connections that are meaningful? Is the programs that we're doing, is it going to benefit them in the long term? I'm going to start saying no to the things that I can't say yes. I can't answer those 3 questions and say yes, because I know that's for the young people. I had 13 people in my case study. All of the relationships piece was so important to them. So that helps to kind of inform me to make the best decisions for my own local program.
What were those 3 questions that you mentioned that you wanted to be that if you
Yeah,
can
so
answer yes to?
Yeah, is it a program that, or an experience that's going to form a long-term connection for them? So yes or no. is it intentional? So is it like an intentional or cultivated experience? So there's going to be some sort of outcome for them, yes or no. And then my third one is like, is it just busy work, or is it going to actually benefit them? Like, so is it just an experience to have an experience, or is it an experience that's going to have like the added factor? So that's how I'm making my decisions right now. We'll see if that changes.
Do you base benefit as in a direct benefit or as a secondary? Like what they're doing now might benefit some other kids someplace else, like actually gathering the data. Okay.
Yeah, so it could be, there's multiple layers to that, right? So, but I've actually said no to stuff, which is not something that I did prior to this. So,
Like, what's an example of something you said no to?
offering a one-time workshop on chickens. There could be benefit for that, but that was not something that I needed to take the time to do.
Thank you all so much for your expertise in sharing the work that you've done. I've had the opportunity to coach Christy and Mitch's first SciFar project, and can attest to the commitment that they have to ensuring that the work is done, and is done in a very high quality way and in a very equitable way for a group of individuals who are often disenfranchised. And so it's such a pleasure. I can never get enough of hearing the work being talked about. And so I do appreciate your time, Martha. Thank you so much for the time that you spent sharing with us about the research that you've done at Brookings. And with that being said, it is 1:45 and I don't want to hold you any longer. We have a 15-minute break, and then we have our